Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never popped into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the lights go on, isn't that? And I explore the inside and the outside. You guys, it has been a week for myself, and I suspect kind of feeling what's going out in the world, just I enjoy watching the lives. I enjoy watching the content of those people that I admire, that for my own bit of movement that I make my movement by the movement of others, right? And you get to know them along the way, and you get to notice a little bit of differences and get to notice how they grow, how they go down side branches and pick up new skills and new interests and new relationships, and the speed at which they move in their lives, that ebb and flow. And really is an ebb and flow that we actually do give um, a certain amount of energy at certain periods of the course of our, just say, our year, right? That there are slow periods and there are busy periods. There are periods in our lives where we're in contemplation, or we're being students, where we're actually just buckling down and paying attention, right? Sometimes it is in that exertion, knowing that it our movement is dictated in by not necessarily what we can contribute, but in how far we can. Well, maybe it is contribute, because we have to contribute to ourselves, don't we? We have to fill our cups, because we really aren't any good to anybody else unless we do fill those cups. I was just watching a video. Uh, Robert Odo, I've been following his content, oh my goodness, for a few years now. He does astrology, numerology, but he's a very insightful, very heartfelt leader out there, and he divvies out his lessons in a way where I think sometimes he gives more credit to those other parts of him than he does for himself. So I get it. They call it imposter syndrome, right? Where you don't recognize how good you really are. Um, I think he understands the value in what he brings to the table, and he puts a lot of heart and a lot of work and a lot of effort into it, right? But like I said, sometimes he doesn't take his fair share in the credit, right? Lots of us don't, in our own unsuredness, in our own sense of right and wrong, right? That guilt and shame that comes to the surface. Robert hasn't been consistent lately, but just like everybody else in the world, he has been put into the mix, and it's not necessarily all impacting him personally, but in his environment, in his community, in his family, right? And yet tonight, and I haven't finished it. He did a live tonight, and he was still in the midst of it. Over 2 hours later, and he was still and still is giving her in his live show, right? That passion for what he does, that he's I could see how good it's doing, not only to the audience who hasn't seen him for a while, but for himself, because he doesn't want to let the live go tonight. He wants it to be full. He wants it to be like a comfortable blanket, right? To make everything okay, when sometimes things don't feel like they're okay. And sometimes, it's not just a matter of feeling like they're okay, but actually being okay, right? Especially when there are things that go on in our lives that impact it, right? In a way that causes us a lot of grief, a lot of money, a lot of energy, a lot of heartbreak sometimes, confusion sometimes. So it's important for us to recognize it is about the balance. It's about being able to know when to pull out. I didn't go live yesterday. Oh my goodness. In truth, you know, if it wasn't for that guilt and shame, right, I might not have showed up tonight. But that's the thing. I feel so much better that I did, that it's serving me, it's doing me well, right? That the lesson might be there for somebody else. But in this moment when I was just like, oh, I still have my life to do, I'm so tired and I'm clock watching, I've been procrastinating all day, and yet not really procrastinating because I was involved in myself, involved in maybe the plans for my future, in that contemplation, in my projects that I promised myself that I was going to get done. I want to feel good when I'm able just to tie things off, right? Maybe not neat with the bow, but the best that I can, without ruffling feathers, without making a difficult situation, because it's difficult, right? It's not just difficult for me. And if you don't know, I gave my notice at my job, a job that I absolutely just loved. I really did love it. But there were aspects of that job that in my lessons, if I had stayed, right? If I had stayed, uh, it would have gone against what I put so much work into, right? Into myself, that I wouldn't be treating myself with that respect for the boundaries that I worked so hard to establish and to uphold. Maybe not to establish, maybe establishing them was the easy part, recognizing what boundaries I needed. That was the hard work because as highly sensitives and as empaths, we tend to be pleasers, don't we? We tend to think of the others' well being before we think of our own. We divvy out those lessons in the hopes to help somebody else without filling up our cup, without even taking ourselves into consideration and saying, oh my goodness, right? Like Robert had, oh my goodness, just not one or two things going on in his life, but it was like, when you're down, it just seems like for some, it's like the perfect opportunity to get those extra kicks in, right? And to be kicked when you're down already, it's kind of depleting. Is that the word? No. Right? It's kind of like where you just want to just give up and just take it because that's what you've been doing and you're kind of used to it and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? That you just see one struggle after another and this is just one more, right? And you're not going to fight it. You're just going to absorb it, right? That's not the way we're supposed to move. That's not moving forward. That's just kind of laying there and seeing what happens, not even praying because you know what's going to happen. I would much rather make it a game of tag, right? Make it a little bit more challenging for that struggle, those hiccups, those failures, those mishaps, those betrayals, those heartbreaks, that pain to come into my life that, I do have some say, right? I call it the kush kush in those difficult times, right? That I could smile and make a little bit of joke, make something a little bit light when it really is actually quite heavy sometimes. And that's the best part about being able to do my kind of shadow work, right? Working in those emotions because we don't want to be in it, but we have to be in it in order to feel good about ourselves, to recognize that sometimes we do have to put a hold on it, to dig in our heels, to call it a day, to give ourselves a break, right? Let us off the hook and not be able, or, well, can be able to, but not with intent to make it difficult, right? To make it so that that guilt and shame shows up, and in doing that, we end up showing up depleted with nothing to give, not even for ourselves. That was a good lesson he offered up today, right? I haven't seen him online for a little bit, so it was kind of a no brainer to go into his content. I didn't recognize that it was going to be 2 hours later and he's still going to be going. But how amazing is that, right? To be able to have all those struggles, right? All that heavy going on in your life, but still recognize you have to move forward. You don't have a choice, right? You really don't, because nothing gets better unless we keep moving, right? And sometimes there is a big branch in the middle of the road, right? Maybe there is a big mess, so big that you can't step over it, that you sometimes have to go around it. Sometimes you have to go through it. Sometimes, right, you just take a different route and pick up a different experience that offers up different lessons. And sometimes those different lessons are exactly what you needed. That's my hopes in giving my notice, right? That it's going to offer up opportunities that might not have been plausible if I wasn't free and open to a new experience, because I did love my job, right? Nobody in their right mind would tear me away from a job that I loved. But there were plans, there were goals, there were dreams, and there were ambitions. And I wouldn't be, right, worthy of showing up here and divvying out that music unless I was willing, right, to truly listen to it. And maybe that wasn't a good analogy, right? That I have to take my own lessons. I don't have a choice in that, right? Because again, I am the evidence in that. Who's going to follow suit unless they see that evidence? This is the world that we live in, right? We need to see that evidence. We need to feel that evidence. We need to know that evidence. Somebody's got to take the first step. And I look out there and I see, oh my goodness, people showing up anyway, right? Like Robert Odo, right? I haven't seen him for a long time, but you can guarantee when my live show is over, I'm going to get right back into it. I'd be curious to see if he went another hour on top of the two that he put in, right? Sometimes it's just getting started. Sometimes it's just knowing deep down what's best for you, right? You might not feel like taking that medicine. You might not feel like doing it. You might not feeling like even sitting it and listening to it for one more minute. But if you do, right? You never know. You never know what crucial bit of information will come across your path that'll lead into an experience that you could make a better choice, right? Make a little bit of movement for yourself. And that means you got to stall yourself out a little bit in that balance of it. You better listen to yourself, right? You better. We're not here to beat ourselves into the ground, right? Right to the point where we don't have anything to offer. And if we did have something to offer, we're too exhausted to offer it, or too heartbroken to offer it, or too broken, period, to offer it, right? Okay, you guys, let's pick a card. Just a couple of minutes. Funny story on the cards. This week, let's have a sip of my coffee first. I make a good cup of coffee. So, the past few weeks, I've been pulling the cards, and there have been certain words that consistently have been popping up. I've been pulling these cards, and because I made the cards myself, I kind of did this and this to see if they were all even, if there was a reason why I was picking these same cards. So the words I was grabbing was balance, community, and freedom. And these words popped up 2 or 3 times, and sometimes in a poll, and I'm going, oh my goodness, balance again, forget that. And I put it in the car and I give it a shuffle, 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 shuffle. And then guess what I pull? The same word, balance. And I did the same thing with community. So I thought, well, right, we got to make sure that it's not the cards themselves, because I made this deck of cards. So I bought a paper cutter and I was cutting the cards, and now, okay, not too bad. Not too bad. Right? I found it interesting. We'll see if those words pop up consistently this week. It has been for past few weeks now, right? So I want to make sure if those words are pulling up as often as they are, right, that I'm listening and I'm putting those words into action into my life, right? Okay, you guys, let's pull one card, spend a couple of minutes in a perspective, and see what we come up with. Okay, just a couple of minutes, and then I'm calling it a night. Past few nights, I've been so exhausted, ready for bed at like 10 o'clock, and it's been a struggle to make it till midnight. I like to go to bed at midnight because as soon as I put my head on the pillow and give my cat a little scratch on the head, right, I am out till the alarm goes off in the morning. So midnight is a good time for me. And as we mature, we don't need as much sleep as we used to, right? Okay. The word we got today, well, this is a word that I got last week too. We got this word acceptance tonight. Acceptance is awful off Acceptance is often settled by majority. Wow, this is a good one then, because I'll tell you a story. My dad ran his household by majority rules. The only time the majority did not rule was hockey night in Canada, because he had 4 daughters and his wife. There was no argument, there was no discussion, right? He won the battle with that. And if it was just time to spend time with our dad, so we would just sit on the couch with him as he, right, watched the hockey fights, because in those days they didn't even wear hockey helmets. And right, the only reason I would sit through a hockey game with my dad was for the fights, right? And this was the norm in the 70s, right? When it came to hockey, I remember that much anyway, right? But my dad ran his house by majority. He had a including himself. He had a family of 6. My dad always had the last say, unless he was offering up a lesson in something, or he wanted to bring somebody, one of my sisters or myself, to the forefront to make the final decision, because he might have already had anticipated what that decision would be. That decision, winning decision of what we were going to do, right? And that's usually what it was. It wasn't, sometimes it was what restaurant we were going to go, where are we going to go for a drive, what was the trails we were going to walk, right? There was what we were going to talk about, what we were going to sing in the car, right? Because my dad was big on car songs. My dad loved the road trips. I love the road trips. I tell you, if I had it all over to do it again, you know, I would have been on the road, right? ASAP, getting out of high school, I would have gone on the road, and I probably would have stayed on the road, right? I exploring, love exploring the world. Okay, let's just not get sidetracked, because the word is acceptance, right? And because my dad had hockey night in Canada, we just had to accept that was just the way it was. There was no arguing, there was no discussions in that. We just had to accept that. Now, acceptance in that is a whole lot different than having to be accepting of possibly somebody getting maybe a sad diagnosis in their heart, or finding somebody in their family has passed away, and we didn't get a proper opportunity to say goodbye or make amends for strong words or strong actions that we had towards each other, right? And then that's when the guilt, and that's when the shame, and that's when we beat ourselves up and we make ourselves feel bad, so that when we do show up and we do offer up the gifts, right? We don't think that we're worthy. Again, we talked about that imposter syndrome, right? We don't think that we're worthy. We don't think that we have a gift, right? Because, well, situations situations happen, and because if we don't feel that we can have any control over the outcome of it, right, that we think that possibly, right, we aren't worthy, we're not capable, we're not brave enough, we didn't try hard enough, right, we're not good enough, right? There's a reason that it didn't happen, that forced us into that acceptance. But sometimes that acceptance is just a matter of accepting whatever the situation is, and smiling when you can smile, and comfort ourselves where we feel that we can feel a little bit better, or take on a little bit more from our crappy days, right? You know, we don't always get the opportunity to see how things will play out. Right? Lots of times things happen in a split second that turn our lives right around. But sometimes we get ourselves in those situations where we don't have any control in it at all. We didn't even get a say in it, or possibly we didn't even know it happened. We're just getting the news in that now. And yet, right, we involve ourselves so much emotionally, even physically and mentally. We involve ourselves in that, and we forget that sometimes all we have to do, right? And I make it sound easy, but the idea is you can't cry over spilt milk, right? If you can't do anything, if you can't make the situation better, and right? Sometimes making a situation better is just knocking on the next door neighbor with a casserole, or right. And this is just an analogy as to what happened, but you can find ways, right? But sometimes you don't get a say, right? Sometimes you don't get to say goodbye. Sometimes, right, you're going to feel that guilt and shame. And in the end, all you can do is just accept it for what it is, right? Because otherwise, that guilt and shame will just be triggered every time that situation is mentioned, or that person comes up in the conversation, right? Or a similar, right? That similar situation comes across your path, and it just triggers you to the point where you just, right, you react badly, because sometimes it's just in that cause and effect too. And sometimes when we're triggered, right, we don't know how we're going to react, and sometimes we just have to accept that. Now that was pretty weak as far as I'm concerned in that today, but you know what, I am pleased with how my day went. Lots of stuff going on in my life right now, just like everybody else. And it's good to be reminded that I'm not the only one, and it's not like misery loves company. It's not like that at all, right? I wouldn't wish negative or sad or heartbreaking or difficult situations to come into anybody's lives, but they come into our lives for a reason. So each one of us is going to have to play with that, dance with that, right? And experience that in however way it's presented to us, and however way that we can absorb that. We just have to accept that we absorb things differently from each other in different capacities too, right? Yeah, we're all chasing what the next person in front of us is doing, how much they're doing. And then when we can't meet that, again, we beat ourselves up, not even thinking that we can just accept that we're not that smart or that fast or that strong in that, right? You're doing your own thing, and you have your own finish line. I have my own finish line, and I have my own capacities for what I can take, right? Just like, Robert Otto does, right? And he showed up. He took a little bit of break. That was his balance, right? To each one of us, we have to figure out what balance looks for each one of us. It really does. And then, right, just accept it for what it is, right? Not beat yourself up, because things are changing. Things are always changing. They always are. Okay, you guys, I'm going to bed. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.